my Jesus. Now and the last, in mansions of glory and endless delight, I'll ever adore thee, heaven so bright. I'll sing with the glittering crown on my brow. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. Thank you for participating, Brother Chris. Thank you, Phyllis.
You know, yeah, we are going to miss the Wagners, and don't forget about our celebration of them leaving tomorrow night. Oh, wait a minute, he wasn't supposed to know that we were that excited. No.
We're going over their house. We're going over their house, right?
We're going over their house. It is a surprise party at their house. Bring lots of loud music. Anyways, no, we will miss you, Brother Wagner. We have enjoyed having you in here. The sounds of your snoring have encouraged me every Sunday morning. I'm just kidding. We love you. We will miss you guys, and we wish you the best of luck. Huh? Brother Wagner. We love you. We do. And Jackson is going to miss his best friend, Miss Linda. He absolutely adores Miss Linda. He sees her coming. Remember him going to the doors and just waiting patiently like a dog at the doors for her to come in. So yes, we will miss you all, but we know that you'll make your statement at the next place you go. So we love y'all. Anyways, happy Sunday, August 21st. This year is going by way too fast. And before we know it, we're going to be saying Merry Christmas and then Happy New Year again. It's crazy. But let me ask y'all this morning, how many like safety? Safety. Like to be safe. I tell you what, when I get in my car, I buckle up. If there's anybody that ever goes in my house, I could probably knock on a couple different things around and there'd be a gun in it. We're well prepared. We like to be safe and do. But how many understand that not necessarily in, we'll say, safety devices like weaponry or a home security system or anything like that? How many of us find safety in other things or people? Things in our life that we rely on for safety, or we feel safe in their arms, in their presence. How many understand that? Right? Well, this morning we're going to take a look and we're going to apply this theme to what is going on in Paul's journey today. Where did we leave Paul last week? We left him pleading his case to King Agrippa. And Agrippa was said, well, you know what? Had you not pleaded your case to Caesar, well, you would have been a free man, which I don't believe that. But either way, that was his statement. He found him not guilty, but he was going to send him up to Rome. This was the promise of God, right? God had a promise. He was going to make his way to Rome. And we know we went through the fact that, well, it wasn't the way Paul originally thought this was going to happen, but God said everyone to do it, and the Romans are going to pay for you to get there. So this is what's happening. But this morning, before we jump into chapter 27, we got how many more chapters left? One more chapter. Now, next week, me and Brittany will not be here. It is a combined Sunday school, so we took that opportunity. We're going to take care of something, and we saw that as a perfect opportunity to do so. So we're going to use that so we don't have to find a fill-in. But then we will be back to finish out at the beginning of September, chapter 28. But chapter 27 of Acts, turn there, and then we will say a prayer and get started. Dear Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to learn your word this morning and understand the things that we need to know and how to get through certain things in life and how we should depend and who we should depend on and the things that we should take into consideration when we're looking at safety in our lives. Lord, I thank you for everything you've done. In Jesus' name, amen. But so let's get this party started this morning, chapter 27, verse 1. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, and delivered Paul and a certain other prisoners under one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. So, okay, hey guys, you're going to go to Rome. You know, they didn't just send one person at a time. They kind of waited. And this was the time that they got everybody together. We know that I'm sure Paul wasn't the only one that appealed to Caesar. And more than likely, that's what most of these other prisoners in this group had done. And we know this Julius was not Julius Caesar. It was a popular name, just like you'll see many other Chris's and whatnot around the world. There's plenty of other Juliuses. Now, he was a centurion, which means how many troops was he in charge of? 100. So he, needless to say, had 100 troops with him. But we don't know much about him. But I want you to look at something there. It says, they delivered Paul and a certain other person. Okay, and entering into the ship. Oh, I didn't read that verse, did I? My goodness, I skipped that verse. That goes with this whole segment. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia, one of Aristarchus and Macedonia, of Thessalonica being with us. And what I meant to say was, do we notice the word there again? That is very important. We. Who's with him now? Luke. Luke is with him. So, being with us. So that's the word, us. That's the important word there. Luke is with them again. So Luke somehow is on this ship. And let's continue reading and we'll see why here in a little bit. Verse 3, and the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go unto his friends and to refresh himself. And when he had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we come into Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete, over against Salmone, and hardly passing it, came into a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lasea. Fair Havens, doesn't that sound like a golf course? They have golf courses back then? So they went to a golf course. Paul was going to this high-end resort. No. Anyways, so it says that he was able to kind of find some favor among his friends and get some help. So he obviously was able to get off the ship and but he gave Paul this leniency. Why did he give Paul this leniency? Well, Paul was not a condemned man. More than likely, if Paul got away, there wasn't a bounty for this guy's head, right? Paul didn't have a sentence. The other men on the ship, the other prisoners, they were condemned. They had a sentence. They had something they were serving. They went to go get pardoned. But this guy Paul is appealing to Caesar to appeal to Caesar. He has no time he's serving or anything like that. And so they're sailing, they're on this boat, they're going to different ports and everything like that. And it's getting this time of year. Things are kind of getting bad on the Mediterranean Sea there. And now these boats that he was on, he found this Alexandrian ship. So they were on a smaller ship, and they get to this port there, and they get on this ship. It was a ship hauling grain. Now, I want to give you guys an example of what happened. I kind of got a little lost in my things here, so we're going to go back a little bit. So during a certain time of year, the Mediterranean Sea, okay, would get so bad that you could not sail on it. And basically, there was a maritime law that kind of canceled all shipping lanes. But coming to Alexandria, the Romans, if they needed grain to make bread and to do these important things, well, Caesar would put his stamp on it, and he would basically, it would be like an insurance policy. He would say, okay, hey, the shipping lanes are closed, but we need this. So if you go out and you take the risk of sailing, we'll still cover you if you survive any wreckage, okay? So this is what happened. This is where they're at. They're at this point. They sailed into this port. Now they're going to get on this big ship and head up toward Rome, okay? So this is getting a time of year where the seas are going to get rough. So the ship, let's give you an idea of it, typically is about 140 feet long, 36 feet wide. It only had one mast with this big square sail. Instead of what we're kind of thinking as a rudder, they used two paddles on the back part of the ship that people would have to kind of use to steer it. Now, these are all made with wood. This was not welded together. This was an old wood ship. This wasn't something that typically could survive a lot of beatings. Okay, it could take a beating, but not like what you see today. It wasn't like he was on Royal Caribbean heading up there, big waves, and he just kind of, stabilizers. No, if there was big waves, you felt every single waves. So when they're at this port, everything starts kind of getting worse with the weather. So let's see what Paul has to say about that. In verse 9 it says, now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the landing and ship, but also of our lives. So Paul sees that the seas are getting dangerous. He doesn't really think it's a good idea to go. He's saying, hey, listen, we're going to probably lose our lives here. But who was Paul? Did Paul have any reason to tell them about the seas? Did he know anything? Well, absolutely. If you look in 2 Corinthians 11 and 25, he tells us that by about that time, that Paul was already shipwrecked 3 times. So he knew. Paul knew what he was talking about. He's no dummy. He's experienced. He's a man of knowledge, and he's been through it all. But needless to say, let's go down to 11. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenix, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, and left toward the southwest and northwest. So, all right, it's kind of a tongue twister, really. So anyways, now we're at, when he said the feast before in verse 10, we're talking about the Day of Atonement, because this is looking in October. Okay, that's usually when the Day of Atonement was. That was the feast that they were talking about. So they're in this port of Fair Haven. Fair Haven was a small little town. And if you are a pagan Roman, you want to be in an area where there's a lot more stuff happening, a lot more things going on. And it really was a sleepy town. There was not much there to offer. It wasn't the best place to be able to spend the winter months. So they said, we're going to go out to Phoenix and be in the desert, right? Go see what's in Arizona. No, Phoenix over there off Crete, I think is what it said. Yeah, Crete. So they said, we're going to go. But why was it important? Why do you think the centurion wanted to listen to the ship's captain over Paul? Well, they had some money involved. If they made it to where they needed to go, they got to a bigger port, they're at a better place to be able to get some money, get this stuff offloaded, and deal with this stuff. There's always money involved or something somewhere involved in these things. And they wanted to go to a better port. So the captain says, we're going, and the centurion says, you know what, I'm going to take this guy's advice. Well, think about it. If you were in his position, wouldn't you? It's the captain of the ship you're on. You go and trust his judgment. You would assume that maybe he's dealt with this before. So I kind of get it. But so they sail on. And let's see what happens here. Let's go to verse 13. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind, caught in Roculodon. And when the ship was caught, they could not bear up to the wind, and let her drive. And running under a certain island, which is called Claudia, we had much work to come by the boat. So, why did they sail close? They wanted to be close to the shore. That was the route that was taken by these boats during this, we'll say, off-season or no-sail season, because if there was an incident, they were close to the shore. They were able to have some kind of evacuation plan in place. And guess what? When they went to leave, now Paul saw the weather getting bad. Everybody saw there was some stuff going, but well, they saw there was a break in it. Okay, maybe things are getting good. You ever see that in your life? Maybe things are going to get good. The storm's over. Oh, no. They set sail. They got out there. Everything looked good. It was a false promise. And they get out there, and it starts getting so bad they can't even control the boat. And there's that term, let her drive, means they were just like, all right, wind take us. Wind take us. Because you know what? There's nothing that we can do to really get this boat going. This Euroclydon was more like a hurricane. It's basically what it was. It was ultimately this type of, what is that storm called that came through New York? It's not a hurricane, but it was I forget what they call it, like a nor'easter type of storm. So like something like that, or a hurricane. It was a massive storm. So now they're out and about, and they're securing the ship, doing what they need to do to try to protect the ship. Let's go down to verse 17. And when they had taken up, they used helps undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with the tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of this ship. They're out in the ocean. They had warning not to go from Paul, but they decided they're going to take this trip anyways. And when you are out in the ocean, like I said, these ships were not made very tall, very massive like this. When you're on a Royal Caribbean or anything like that, you're on the deck there, you're pretty high up. Well, these guys are pretty much right there. I'd say this would be about how high we were up, and then there's the water. When you're tipping back and forth like that, you're going to get water in the boat. It's going to be a mess. Well, so they want to lighten the ship, so they're down. They're not staying down. So they're throwing off all these valuable things to be able to protect this ship, to protect their safety, right? Because they didn't want to be in the water. None of us want to be in the water. They're trying to hang on to what is making them feel safe. Verse 20 there, it says, and when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. When you're in the middle of the ocean, you don't have a navigation system. This wasn't these days where they could just look down and find out where they were. They couldn't ask Siri give you directions to the nearest port. They had to rely on the moon and the stars and many other natural things. Well, when the moon and the stars are covered up, and you can't see where you're going, especially at night, you're going to lose a little bit of hope. And they've been going through this for several days now. Solar flares messing up GPS. But when they couldn't see the moon and the stars, and they couldn't get a good idea of where they were going, you start to lose hope. You're out here in the middle. You got this storm. There was no break. There was nothing that made them feel like, okay, we have no hope. They just start to give up. Have you ever been there? I've done that. Verse 21, but after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of this ship. Listen, I love Paul. Basically, Paul has been quiet, doing his thing, helping him out, and then he finally is like, you know what? I told you so. I told you so. But listen, the good news is we're going to be okay. Oh, no, he didn't say that yet. Sorry, spoiler alert. He tells him that. But he said, sorry. He says, you should have listened to me, and we wouldn't have had any harm done to the ship. We wouldn't have any problems. We wouldn't be in this position if you would have just listened to me and stayed where we were at to let this storm go through. Now we keep going here. Verse 23. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, fear not, Paul, thou must Be bought before Caesar. And lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, and it shall be even as it was told to me. Howbeit, we must cast upon a certain island. This is the part I want to get at. This is the part I'm going to reel in everything. We're going to guide off of this. Tells him, you know what? Told you so. Listen to me. You should have listened to me. You should have not done this. But now we're stuck out here in the middle of the ocean, dealing with a boat that's going to fall apart. But here's some good news. God promised me that I was going to get to Rome. And I'm paraphrasing. I'm adding some things to this. You can read it for what it says, but this is what the connotation is underneath it. I thought I was going to Rome. I didn't know y'all were coming with me. Right? Paul would have assumed he was going to Rome, but he would have never thought, I could never thought in a million years that God would have said, we're going to save this whole boat. But there's a condition. You got to wreck the boat. And I'm stretching the theme out this morning because what happens is God tells us to do things so many times in our life, but so many times we are focused on being in the safety of that thing or wanting what that thing has. You see what I mean? So in this case, these people were so desperate to get the money. They wanted that money. They wanted what that ship had, which was all the grain and all the things. They were willing to risk everything and to take that ship out into waters that were dangerous, to be in a dangerous situation, to be in a position they should have never been in. And all this time to protect the ship, what are they doing? They're throwing away valuable things. They're throwing away things that might benefit them later in life, might have an effect on their finances when they get to the port, or things that they may even need for survival. See, what happens is we get into a place, whether it be a family member, a friend, a church, or a hometown or something, we get put in these places that we don't want to give up the safety. Even when there's a storm coming, we still tread with it. We still want to be a part of it. When God says, I'm here to save you, that is not your safety net. Does that make sense? See, me and Phyllis could probably attest to this. Growing up in West Virginia, there's people that are so scared to leave their hometown, that's their safety net. But because they've stayed, in this case, they left, in Paul's case, but bring this into what I'm saying, because they didn't do what was told to them, because they didn't take heed to the advice, because they didn't follow God, they now have storms in their life that are unnecessary. Does that make sense? And when you are in a position, whether you're in a hometown, whether you're in a church, whether you're with a family member, whether you're with a friend, that God says, get away from, move away from, do this different, you don't need that, this, or whoever in your life, you bring storms upon you, and what happens is, when those storms come in your life, you start to get rid of those things of value in your life to make it really not help you any. You start alienating people that would have been more important to you. You start getting rid of good habits and maybe trading them for bad habits because that's what that friend does. We got to understand this morning that we don't want to be like Paul and them on the ship out in the middle of the ocean. I don't know about you, but I don't want to cause myself purposely to be in a storm. I've done it way too many times. I try to avoid that. The theme this morning is listen to God, and if you are holding on to something, if there is something, someone, someplace, some whatever in your life that you are holding on to for safety, you might just have to run it out and get rid of it. Because that is you're causing storms in your life for no reason, and God's telling you to get rid of it. Let's keep on moving on here. Verse 27. But when the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down, and in Adria about midnight, the shipmen deemed that they might draw near to some country, and sounded and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we should have fallen upon the rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. Well, so they saw some land, and they were like, you know what? I think we can get there. I think we can get there. But oh, wait a minute. No, we're getting a little too fast. Let's draw the anchors down. They didn't want to crash against the rocks. Well, what would God say? You got to crash? Well, they were trying not to crash. So they threw the anchors down. And it said they prayed for day to come. These men, they were like, oh man, we're going to crash. We're going to die. Let's hurry up, daytime. Let's keep on going here in verse 30. And he says, and as the shipmen were about to flee the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under the collar as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship, Paul said unto the centurion and the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. And whilst the day was coming up, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, this day is the 14th day that ye have tarried and continued fasting, and having taken nothing. Wherefore I pray unto you, take some meat, for this is your health, for this is for your health. There shall not be a hair fall from your head of any of you. And we had thus spoken, he took the bread and gave thanks to God in presence of all of them. And we had broken it, he began to eat. And they were all of good cheer, and also took some meat. And we were in all the ship 216 souls. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and cast out the wheat into the sea. So there were some, the shipmates, the sailors, not the prisoners, the sailors were trying to run away. Trying to run away. They were like, you know what? We see land ahead. We're going to try to get up there and get to safety. We don't care about y'all. Paul said basically, God said we're all going to survive, but if we're not all on this boat, then we all ain't going to survive. In order for this to happen, we got to do it the way God said. How many understand that we sometimes don't want to listen to God? We want to do it our own way when we see another version of safety ahead. See, they saw the island, they saw this safety, they said, I'm going to run to that, not listening to what God had said. See, the whole point of all this is that we need to understand no matter what, at the end of the day, we can't fall into the safety and security of a thing, a place, or whatever. We have to understand that God is the only way to get us out of it, even if we put our own self in it. God is the only safety net that we need. And when we see a moment to jump off ship, when we see a moment to end what we're doing, or to get out of the storms that we've caused, we tend to try to do it too early before God gave us the true authority to do it. Does that make sense? So, Paul's telling them, hey, we've been out here for 2 weeks, I get it. And he says the word fasting. Now, they were not fasting in prayer, I can tell you that much. They were fasting because they were seasick. And they could not eat. That term fasting, and that is geared toward the whole, they were sick. They couldn't hold anything down. But they were at this moment now, Paul said, we need to eat. Because guess what? We're going to be okay. Paul understood what God said. He had the true faith. I'm sure he was scared too before the angel came to him. Paul had the faith, so he talked to him. And he said, hey, you know what? Let's eat. Let's go verse 39. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into which they were minded, and if it were possible to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up anchors, they committed themselves unto the sea, and loosed the rudder bands, and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind, and made towards shore. And falling into a place where two seas meet, they ran the ship aground. And the forepart struck fast, and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. We're just going to finish this out. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded they which could swim cast themselves into the sea and get to land. And the rest, some on boards, some on broken pieces of the ship, and so it came to pass that they escaped, all safe to land. So, where they ran aground was actually an island called Malta. And actually, where they ran aground, that area is called St. Paul's Bay, because Paul was there. So they get to this land, they say, you know what? We're just going to give it all. So they pull the anchors up, they let everything go, and they said, we're just going to run this sucker aground. They did. The back end fell apart, the front end was still put together. And in order to get out and get to get to land, well, they all had to kind of jump. Well, the soldiers were a little afraid. They wanted to shoot at the prisoners. They wanted to kill them. Why? Remember what I said at the beginning. What happened? Now, this was not Paul. This was the other prisoners. They were all condemned men. So if they would have escaped and they had no way to prove where they were or to find them, well, these soldiers who lost them would have to face the same punishment. So they did not want to risk their lives for these men. But the centurion, thank God, it's amazing how God has a way and provides a way for safety when He promises it. He told them not to do it. He didn't want to kill Paul. He didn't want to risk that because Paul was in with them. Who knows? They could have had bad aim and hit him. Because he trusted Paul. He wanted to save him. So he let them go. And I could assume by the fact that they made it all safe to sea that everybody did what they were supposed to do. They rounded up everybody that got it. But my point this morning, we are the cause of a lot of our own problems in our life, and sometimes that is because we are looking for safety and security in the wrong places. And as I give the example of the hometown, there's people that don't want to leave because that's all they know. That's the only place they've been to. Everything else seems so big, so scary, so whatever. But there is something you're causing your own storms sometimes by not moving. But sometimes you cause your own storms by moving. It all depends on the situation, but we got to understand we need to focus not on the safety and security by where we're at, who we're talking to, or whatever, but understand God is that ultimate source of safety and security, and He's the one that we need to trust to get us through whatever we've put ourselves into at the end of the day. When we lose that faith in God to guide us to safety and we start putting it into something else, that's when we start creating more storms in our life that are necessary. So I hope and pray this morning that we can remember who's in charge. We just need to listen. We just need to listen, and if we're told to go somewhere, go. If we're told to stay, stay. If we're told to get that person out of our life, pray about it. Make sure that's what God says, but get them out of your life. I've done it before myself. It's not an easy task. But sometimes it's what God says. And that's our lesson this morning. And I'm going to ask for one last time, Brother Wagner, will you dismiss us in prayer this morning? Amen. Y'all are dismissed. And the good news is I don't have a rental this morning, so I